I'm Aaron Baker from PhoneDog.com, and it's part 2 of a dogfight battle between the LG Nexus 5 and the HTC One. They're both awesome Android phones, but it's a dogfight, so one, and only one, can win. In part 2, we'll find out just which device that is, so stick around. Is it the Nexus 5 or the HTC One? We'll find out, starting right now. It's part 2 of a dogfight battle between the LG Nexus 5 or the Google Nexus 5, depending on what you want to call it, and the HTC One. Two great Android phones, two very different missions in a lot of ways, two very different demographics they're appealing to in a lot of ways, but that doesn't stop us here at PhoneDog. It's dogfight time, Android style. Before we get too far into that, I want to thank our partners at Best Buy Mobile. They give us devices kind of like these, actually both of these devices, for use in our One Paw Bandit giveaway game. So when you go into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out without any sort of carrier biasness. They're unbiased, whether it's Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, or even T-Mobile you need. They'll hook you up and make sure you get what works best in your respective area, where you live, the mountain you live on, or the gully you live in. They'll hook you up at Best Buy Mobile. So continuing on in part 2, we're going to talk more about the software because it's a key differentiator in a lot of ways between these two phones. So obviously, as you know, the Nexus 5 has Android 4.4 KitKat pre-installed. It's a vanilla version. You don't have any OEM or carrier installed bloat here. You've got a clean vanilla version of Android, and it's the latest version at that. Like I said, Android 4.4 KitKat. Then over here, you've got Android 4.3 Jelly Bean, the latest or the final version of Jelly Bean, if you will, with HTC Sense version 5 running atop it. Now, what I like, at least in 2013, is a lot of these OEM user interfaces or user experiences are really adding some great value adds. I think Android, even in 4.4, they take steady improvements every single time they release a vanilla version of Android. But I think even in the vanilla version of Android, it's just very plain Jane, and some people love that. That's great for developers. That's great for people to customize. The mainstream consumer, I love the value adds you get and some of the goodies from Sense, from TouchWiz, from LG's UI. Those things are great. I still use on Sense and in TouchWiz. I use the value adds on almost a daily basis in the software, and one of those is over here in the camera. So we'll talk about the camera, and that's how we'll start out part 2 of the dogfight battle. Before, I wanted to point this out. In part 1, I talked about Blink Feed. One of the great things on the Nexus 5 is at least integration out of the box with Google Now. Google Now continues to be very popular, and you can say something like, Google, I'll just click on it. Okay, Google. Let me do that again. Okay, Google, tell me the weather in Dallas. And of course, you can see the weather in Dallas. I have the sound turned off, so it didn't speak it to me, but I can go through here and change things around. I can send text messages, so really robust integration here through Google Now. And of course, this is accessible very much like Blink Feed by swiping to the left by default. Now, you can turn this off if you'd like to. You can customize it and make it your own as well. Add things in like biking and driving directions, and I can come in here, check my reminders, and I can go into settings as well if I don't want it, and turn it off and get rid of Google Now, and then you won't have that to the left if you don't want it. So that said, a nice little integration there with Google Now. But looking at things like camera, you do get some great value adds. One of my favorite things in the HTC One, HTC Zoe capabilities, and we'll talk about that by going into the cameras of the respective devices. Then we'll kind of loop back into some of the software stuff. So 8 megapixel camera here, optical image stabilization, 4 ultra pixel camera over on the HTC One, with 1080p HD video recording capabilities. So we'll take a look at the cameras here just by doing some sample shots right here live on camera or as we're talking, and you can see a nice little camera all around here. A little bit slow on the shutter speed. They say they're going to fix that in software updates, at least that's the rumor. And you can see the on-screen buttons here you still have some on-screen button area right here, but the buttons themselves actually go away. And forgive the focus issues here. The on-screen buttons actually go away when you're in things like camera, when you're in YouTube and more, and then of course it rotates right back into that area. So we'll go back into camera here just to take a look. 8 megapixel camera, like I was saying, HDR capabilities, and again, a very plain, if you will, user interface here in terms of the camera. You've got HDR capabilities here, your settings, but again, very plain and minimalistic. Some people love that. I think mainstream consumers are going to find this to be a bit confusing, considering the fact that this is now being sold in carrier stores, and Google with the Nexus program does want to expand it out a little bit more. But overall, images look pretty decent on this device. Now let's take a look over here on the HTC One. We'll flip the Nexus around and take a look at it and let it focus in. I can snap some stills. Boom, boom, boom. And you know what, just for sake of this, I'm going to show you HTC Zoe, where, for example, I can turn that on and I can take a quick 3-second video. So you can hear me talking, you see the red here filling it up. And I've talked about this extensively on video, so forgive me if you've already seen this. But we'll take a couple of these here, just looking at the video of the Nexus 5. Very, very pretty all around. And I'll turn it off and shoot a couple of images just around my office here. We'll go through, and you can see just, taking a couple quick pics here. And we'll go into the gallery and take a look at those images. So all in all, very clear, very good looking images, and you've got, of course, a wealth of editing options here in the HTC One. I can switch the camera around. I've got photo capture modes, video capture modes, and more, cropping abilities, video quality, ISO, white balance, all that stuff. But what's really cool about this is I'll go into the gallery, for example, and utilize the HTC Zoe capabilities by going to gallery, and forgive me while I pull it away here and take a look at the event. So obviously 11/14, here's my most recent event. And all I have to do is click right here, and you're going to see it's going to make this custom video for me without me having to do anything, which I like a lot. So you can send this to your friends. You do a video for pictures from a wedding, from an event, maybe you camp for the weekend, or you hang out with your friends, take a bunch of pictures, and it does this on its own. And not only that, you have the ability to change the style as well. So if I want to do this, for example, I can do that, and boom, I'm ready to rock and roll. So pretty cool little feature right there. And then, of course, down through here, you got, of course, all your integration with Google services that you expect on both devices, but I do like the camera on the HTC One. Despite having 4 ultra pixels, the image quality on both of these devices is very nice all around. So let's take a look at software and kind of dive in depth a little bit more there, because you are seeing some differences here between HTC Sense, and then, of course, I'll pull that down so you can see between the two, between HTC Sense and vanilla Android. So obviously the look and feel is a little bit different here. In Android 4.3 on the HTC One, you do have your physical battery percentage up there, as opposed to the arbitrary thing that you still, even in Android 4.4 out of the box, you don't have a physical battery percentage indicator. So a little something to keep in mind there. On-screen buttons, obviously physical buttons here, back and home. Home doubles up as Google Now, and if I double tap it, it brings up my recent applications. So you can see just HTC's configuration of recent apps versus stock Android or vanilla Android's configuration of recent applications. So just very much a different look and feel all around on this device as opposed to stock Android. Depends on what you like. I find the Zoe features to be very nice, the blink feed features to be very nice on the HTC One as well. And of course, you can add up to 5 home screens on the HTC One. One of those obviously being blink feed, total of 4 to do what you want to do. Over here, so far as I can tell you, you can add as many. I haven't found a stopping point yet. I've been playing around with this. The one thing I will point out is if you want to add a home screen, so for example, let's say Dropbox is over here. I'm going to bring down another icon to this just so you can see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to bring it over to the final home screen here where Dropbox is. You can't actually add home screens and keep them blank. You have to move applications from one to the other to activate a new home screen. So I think, I kind of see where they're going with that from a minimalist standpoint. It's nice. It's maybe user-friendly, but still I'd like the ability to add home screens, as you can see here, even though there's nothing on these screens. Because for me, I like to have 2 in the center, or 1 in the center rather, 2 on each side to make it look balanced, where you can see that little area right there. You're on your main screen, as opposed to over here, my main screen is here. A little bit more complicated to configure that, so just something you may not care about at all, or you may love. Let's take a look at Quadrant Standard here. Quadrant Standard is not optimized as well as I'd like it to be for KitKat, so keep that in mind, take it with a grain of salt. That said, I get so many requests to do Quadrant Standard, that's why I keep doing it. So again, take it with a grain of salt. The biggest issue with the Nexus 5, battery life. This thing, from a battery perspective, not the best in the world. 2,300 milliamp hours. HTC's done a phenomenal job of maximizing the battery via software in the actual device itself, and I find the standby time to be quite nice over here. A little bit challenging over on this device. Would love to have seen a bigger battery, given the fact that it's got a full 1080p HD display that's around 5 inches on the LG Nexus 5. So keep that in mind. Battery life for me, I get about 10 hours or 9 to 10 hours of moderate use over here. I get a little bit more on the HTC One. Nothing comparison to, for example, the G2 or the Galaxy S4, the Note 3, or some of these other devices with large batteries, but still, I do get a couple of hours more thanks to the software optimization over on the HTC One. So we'll proceed forward and take a look. 12,219, 8,499. Obviously, this has a Snapdragon 800 chipset in it, so keep that in mind, or CPU rather. Keep that in mind. This is not optimized, but still, those are the raw numbers in case you'd like to see them. So great things about both devices over here. It's really going to boil down to personal preference and what you want. Obviously, a huge following behind the Nexus line of devices, and there's a lot to like with 4G LTE connectivity. It brings the Nexus line up into the echelons of the other high-end Android devices on the market, be it the HTC One, Galaxy S4, Note 3, G2, Moto X, all these different devices on the market. That said, a winner has to be declared in the dogfight, and when you look at a winner, you keep everything in mind, the overall experience, the overall value of the device itself. The winner of this, and for a lot of different reasons, as much I'll just dive right into it. The winner of it is the Nexus 5 for a couple of reasons. One, the price point is fantastic, and even though I think the software is far greater, the experience you get is far better on the HTC One, I can't ignore the price point of this device. $350, you get LTE. If you're on 3 of the 4 nationwide carriers, you get a quad-core CPU. I think there's a lot of work to do between vanilla Android, but keeping the whole package in consideration just by a narrow little bit, the Nexus 5 wins. What I love about the HTC One, HTC Zoe, blink feed's fantastic. There's a lot to like over on this device, and I like what Sense 5 has done atop Android. That said, this price point, you just can't beat it over on the Nexus 5 for what you get. So in terms of a bang for the buck, combined with features, Nexus 5 does win. Keep it locked on PhoneDog.com for more. I'm on Twitter at PhoneDog_Aaron. We'd love to hear what you think of this dogfight. Let me know, and let me know which device you like the best. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.